Hey friend, welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. I am Heather. I've been podcasting on Tudor England since 2009 with my show, which makes it the original Tudor History Podcast. This channel is where I put all of my episodes from all of my shows, as well as tons of extra content like this video right here. Today, we are going to talk about a woman who was not native English. She lived a fascinating life. She was actually from Persia, and her name was Teresa Sampsonia Shirley. So we are going to talk about her. But before we do that, if you want to see more Tudor history in your YouTube feed, why don't you go ahead and hit subscribe so you never miss a video that comes out. Okay, so Teresa Sampsonia Shirley is not a name that you often hear in history class, but her life was nothing short of extraordinary. She was born into a noble Circassian family in Persia. She went on to marry a Robert Shirley, who was an English adventurer and diplomat. And together they crisscrossed continents on missions for Shah Abbas the Great. They went through the courts of Europe. They defied expectations at every turn. So Teresa's story is about courage, love, and bridging two very different worlds. She was born right close to the end of the Elizabethan period and lived into the Stuart period. So she kind of goes a little bit beyond our time, but she is super fascinating. And I mean, she was born in the Tudor period. So we are going to talk about her. So she was born in 1589 into a noble Circassian family in the Safavid Empire, which is what we now think of as Iran. She grew up in a very vibrant city, Isfahan, and she was immersed in the culture of Shah Abbas's court. In 1608, she married Robert Shirley. Now, he was an Englishman who had been sent to Persia on a diplomatic mission. Their union was a bit of a political statement, actually. With Shah Abbas's blessing, Teresa converted to Catholicism. She adopted the name Teresa, and she set out on a journey that would take her far from her homeland. So Robert, her husband, had been at the court of Shah Abbas the Great. As part of this diplomatic and military mission, he had been sent to Persia by his elder brother, Anthony Shirley, who had initially established some ties at the Safavid court. The Shirleys wanted to secure alliances between the empire and the European powers against their mutual rival, the Ottoman Empire. I actually did a series on the Battle of Lepanto, which was the biggest naval battle in history, I think, definitely European history, I think all of history. Somebody will correct me on that if I'm wrong, I'm sure. But anyway, so this is right around that time when the Ottoman Empire is right up against Europe, has Vienna, like right there, and Christendom is very nervous. It was actually a really big deal for England to come in and fight in Lepanto because Elizabeth had to ally with Catholic Europe. So I actually did a series on the relationship that Elizabeth had with the Ottoman. It was kind of this like the enemy of the enemy is also my friend. And it was really unclear for a little while who Elizabeth was going to support, if she was going to support the Ottoman Empire or if she was going to support Catholic Europe, the people who, had excommunicated her. So this is a period where there's a lot of movement happening with the Ottoman Empire and the Ottoman Empire threatening Europe. And, we had this big naval battle. And so anybody who was also an enemy of the Ottomans was of interest to England and to Europe. So Robert Shirley went to Shah Abbas to advise on military reforms. They were modernizing their military to compete with the Ottomans, and he wanted to introduce some European-style tactics and training and weaponry. Also, he was there as a diplomat. He wanted to act as an intermediary between the European powers and the Safavid court. Shah Abbas had sought European allies against the Ottomans who could help him fight off the Ottomans. And so having somebody there who could negotiate that was important. And then with his wife, Teresa, they became a bit of kind of like this bridge between the East and the West. So that's what we're going to talk about now. They actually went on this whirlwind series of diplomatic missions. They went to Moscow, they went to Poland, Rome, Madrid, and finally back to England. Each stop came with its own set of challenges and dangers, of course. One of the most dramatic moments came pretty early on in their travels. They were somewhere around kind of Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and they were ambushed by enemies of Shah Abbas. And so Robert was actually taken prisoner. Carmelite monks chronicled this journey, and according to these accounts, Teresa played a crucial role in rescuing her husband. She apparently reportedly managed to save him and drive off some of the attackers, and that earned her the title from the Carmelites of being a true Amazon. She already had this reputation of being incredibly brave, rescuing her husband. Pretty big deal. So in 1611, the couple arrived in England, and Teresa made quite an impression at court. She gave birth to their son Henry, whose godparents were Prince Henry Frederick and Queen Anne. But their time in England was brief. By 1613, they were on the move again, quite nomadic, leaving their young son in Sussex as they returned to Persia. Teresa had this reputation of being incredibly brave during these travels. Another contemporary traveler called Thomas Herbert said he considered Robert Shirley the greatest traveler of his time, but said that the undaunted Lady Teresa was actually braver than he was. Teresa's life also made her a symbol of cultural exchange at this point. She arrived in the courts of Europe as this Persian noblewoman in the early 1600s, wearing her heritage proudly. She would often dress in elaborate Persian attire that must have turned heads everywhere she went. Her presence challenged stereotypes about women from the East, and she was widely respected for her intelligence, for her poise, the way she handled herself. Robert died in 1628, and Teresa faced enormous pressure at the Persian court. Some accused her of being a secret Muslim before her conversion. There were threats against her life, but she held firm. She refused to renounce her faith, and eventually she had to leave Persia. Things got too dangerous for her. She found refuge in Rome, where she spent the rest of her life devoted to charity and religion. It was there at the Carmelite convent of Santa Maria della Scala that she had Robert's remains brought from Persia to be buried alongside her. And in fact, the headstone is inscribed as something that Teresa had written herself in the church where they're buried. It says, "To the best and the greatest for Robert Shirley, most noble Englishman, Count Palatinate, Knight of the Golden Spur, Emperor Rudolph's envoy to Shah Abbas, King of Persia, and the representative of the same king to the popes of Rome, blah, 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 blah. Teresa Sampsonia, native of the land of the Amazons, daughter of the Prince of Circassia, set up this monument for her most beloved husband and for herself as a resting place for his bones brought to Rome from Persia for dutiful devotion's sake, and for her own, aged 79, 1668. But anyway, Teresa Sampsonia, she was a remarkable, remarkable woman. She died at age 79. She had spent more than half of her life in Europe. She was a noblewoman, a traveler, a diplomat's wife, and above all, a survivor. So it is interesting that outside of England, she is actually remembered much more widely and seen as a figure of importance in her own right. In English chronicles and places where she's remembered, it's seen as the wife to her husband. Maybe that's some good old-fashioned sexism. It's also maybe because she was the foreign one, and she wasn't there that long, and Robert was actually English. I don't know. But either way, in the other parts of the world where she's remembered, she is remembered on equal footing with her husband. And in 2009 in London, there were two simultaneous exhibitions which featured Teresa and her husband, Shah Abbas, the Remaking of Iran, which was at the British Museum, and then Van Dyck and Britain, which was at the Tate also in 2009, which had her portrait. So there we go. A little bit about Teresa Sampsonia Shirley. Had you ever heard of her before? She's fascinating. Very cool. My life is a little bit richer for having learned about her. So, okay, if you made it to the end of this video and you enjoyed it, I sure would appreciate a press of that like button. You know what it does. It helps to feed the algorithm and get our content to even more people. And if you enjoyed this video, I also hope I earned your subscription to my channel where I put out videos like this all the time. If you would like to keep binging Tudor content, here's that episode I did on Elizabeth and the Sultan, which you might find interesting. And here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Thanks so much for being here. You are deeply loved. Remember that. I'm so glad I shared the planet with you. I will be back very soon. Don't forget to drink your water. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.